So, dear friends, welcome everybody. It's really lovely to be able to be here today. Um, we're going to start by stopping, which is our practice. The Buddha visited a town called Kalama, and there's a Kalama Sutra that the Buddha gave as a teaching. It says the sutra recounts how a group of young people came to ask the Buddha a question. Every religious teacher who passes through our village says that their teachings are the best and most correct. But who should we believe? The Buddha replied, "Friends, do not believe anything, even if it is recorded in the sutras or it is taught by a famous teacher. Whatever you hear, you should use your intelligent and critical mind to examine it carefully and then put it into practice for yourself. If you apply it and you see that you are liberated from your suffering and your difficulties, you will see clearly that it is indeed the truth, and then you can believe in it." And this is really at the basis of our practice, that the Buddha didn't ask us to believe anything. He asked us to trust our intelligence and our experience. And so he offered a whole bunch of practices for us to transform and heal our unskillful states of mind. And we can try them out. And if they work for us, we continue using them. And if they don't, we don't find that we're happier and freer, then we discontinue. So the first thing that we always start with, that the Buddha always started with, was stopping. That in our busy world, our minds get even busier than we are. And it's likened to, our mind is likened to a lake that's all churned up with a lot of mud in the water. And when we can stop and calm and rest our bodies and our minds, then we get a chance for the mud to settle out, the water to get clear, we get clarity, and in that state we can respond a whole lot more skillfully to life. We've been conditioned since even before birth. We have ancestral conditioning, cultural conditioning, and we have acquired our habits of mind. Everything that's happened to us, we've developed ways of reacting to. And our whole lives, we've heard voices inside and outside of ourselves telling us who we should be, what we should want, what we should do, and telling us we needed to be different than we are. So we've come, usually, most of us, to mistrust that we have any inner wisdom. We keep looking for it someplace else. And Thich Nhat Hanh says that we look for goodness, truth, and beauty in teachers, in spouses, in friends, but the only true teacher is one that shows you how to find that in yourself. That's where the goodness, truth, and beauty is. So our practice is to stop running, come back to ourselves, and to be able to stop and calm and rest our mind and our body so that our mind can have some clarity and we can respond a little bit more skillfully to life. We all have inner wisdom, which we don't trust. Like I said, we think that it's someplace, somebody else has that, and we've got to find it. That's our job in life. I've had personal experience getting in touch with inner wisdom, and which is kind of my habit energy. I did it the hard way. I came to the practice by accident. I had a car accident and had a brain injury. And the part of my brain that had been injured was the hypothalamus. And at that time, so long ago, that doctors said that was impossible, that I would be dead if the hypothalamus couldn't get injured or you die. So what I was guided to do, in the hypothalamus, I had no down regulation for stress hormones. So I was in a state of constant anxiety. And what I was guided to do, I just started doing meditation and Tai Chi and Qigong. And when I finally found out what really was going on with my brain, the doctor who figured it out said that because of the specific injury and the specific chemical, that there was no medication, that what I needed to do was to do meditation, Tai Chi, or Qigong, something to calm myself down. So what I realized that with my brain injury, I wasn't able to recall things. I couldn't remember the beginning of a sentence at the end of a sentence. My brain was really, my intellect, my, I guess that's what I would call it, was offline. And so all I had to do was just respond to life in the moment. And the way I chose to respond was to do meditation, Tai Chi, and Qigong. And so when I finally found out that was the medicine that I needed, it really validated my belief in my inner wisdom. And I know that we all have it. This is what the Buddha taught, and that's my direct experience. So the first thing we need to do, like I said, is to stop and calm, come back to be still. And Thich Nhat Hanh says that during the time you're practicing mindfulness, you stop talking. Not only the talking outside, but the talking inside. The talking inside is the thinking, the mental discourse that goes on and on and on inside. Real silence is the cessation of talking, of both the mouth and of the mind. This is not the kind of silence that oppresses us. It's a very elegant kind of silence, a very powerful kind of silence. It's the silence that heals and nourishes us. So this is the first step, and it's, I think, one of the harder things to do is for us to quiet our minds. So what I'm going to suggest is that you take some time to build silence into every day. That whether you have the opportunity, I know some people's lives are very full, and the thought of setting aside a half an hour or an hour to do nothing is just scary for a lot of people. And so what Thich Nhat Hanh suggests is we build little blocks of silence into our day, that we, every time that the phone rings, we breathe to our belly 3 times. Every time we start our car, we breathe through the belly. Every time we turn on our computer, we stop. And so we build in these little blocks of stillness into our everyday life. And those are just little bells of mindfulness to remind us to keep coming back. I think that some people get a little bit concerned. I keep saying, stop every 15, 20 minutes and check in with what your mind is doing. And in our practice, it's absolutely nothing is forced. So it's not a militaristic practice. It's not something where we force ourselves to sit. Everything needs to be enjoyable or we won't do it. And so what I call it, what I've seen in my own practice, is gentle diligence over time is what really leads to transformation at the base. At least it does for me. That we need to be able to be very gentle with ourselves and just build these things into our life maybe a little at a time. And over time, you'll see transformation and healing happening. And Thai says, if we're not calm, if we only listen to our hopes or our anger, we will not be able to receive the truth that is trying to reflect itself on our lake. We need to make our water still if we want to receive reality as it is. If you feel agitated, don't do or say anything. Just breathe in and out until you're calm enough. Stillness is the foundation of understanding and insight. Stillness is strength. And like I said, this is one of the harder things in the hustle and bustle of our culture to build into our lives. But it's almost like taking little vacations, 5-minute vacation here and a 5-minute vacation there. It's a wonderful thing. So I strongly suggest you do your best, very gently, without forcing anything, to try to build those minutes into your daily life. We'll begin today. What I would ask you to do is maybe I'll invite the bell 3 times, and then perhaps pause whatever device you're using and sit for maybe 5 minutes before listening to the rest of the talk, just so you can get into the habit now. Before we do that, I just think that there's a poem by Martha Postlethwaite that I think describes coming back to ourselves in such a beautiful way. She says, "Do not try to serve the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open-cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to the world so worthy of rescue." And I just love the image of creating a clearing in the dense forest of our lives. That's what we do every time we do our sitting meditation. And until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open-cupped hands. That's developing our confidence and trust in our own inner wisdom. The song that's ours alone to sing will come to us. So I will begin with the 3 sounds of the bell, and hopefully you'll take a few minutes to breathe, and then we'll continue. While you're doing that, enjoy every breath. With every exhalation, try your best to release all the tension in your body, and just allow the cares and concerns of your day to dissolve. Give yourself a little rest. We shall begin. At the beginning of the Buddha's teachings with the Four Noble Truths. And a lot of people get really put off by Buddhism because the first noble truth is that suffering exists. And people think, why would I want to know about that? Everybody knows suffering exists. Sounds a little depressing. The good news is there are 4 noble truths. The first is that suffering exists, and we can work our way through to the 4th, which is the way out. The way to transform our relationship with suffering, so we suffer a whole lot less. When the Buddha had his enlightenment, the first Dharma talk that he gave was on the 4 Noble Truths. And the fact that suffering exists, he felt really necessary to talk about, because even 2,600 years ago, people were trying to avoid their own suffering. And trying to run away from our suffering, it only makes us more fearful, more defended, more rigid sometimes. And our world gets smaller and smaller, and our sense of separation gets stronger. So even though that's our natural instinct to want to avoid suffering, the fact is that it doesn't work. It creates more suffering, trying to run away. So Thich Nhat Hanh suggests that we try to embrace our suffering. And he says we embrace our suffering as a mother does a little child that's crying. That when the child is crying, if you ignore it, it just cries louder. And so we try to embrace our suffering and look deeply to try to understand. And he gives us instruction in the 4th of the precepts of our order. He said, aware that looking deeply at the nature of suffering can help us develop understanding and compassion, We're determined to come home to ourselves, to recognize, accept, embrace, and listen to suffering with the energy of mindfulness. We will do our best not to run away from our suffering or cover it up through consumption, but practice conscious breathing and walking to look deeply into the roots of our suffering. We know we can realize the path leading to the transformation of suffering only when we understand deeply the roots of suffering. Once we've understood our own suffering, we'll be able to understand the suffering of others. So, to be able to come back to ourselves, to develop our courage. It takes a lot of courage to be willing to be with our suffering. And every time that we do that, our heart breaks a little, which I think is what we are afraid of. But what my experience has been is when our heart breaks a little, it expands. And every time it expands a little bit more, we can love a little bit better. We can develop more love for ourselves and everybody else. When this happens, I have found that it's very humbling and it's totally liberating. That when we recognize that we are suffering, we accept that we're suffering, we realize that we have everything in common with 100% of other people. And like I said, it can be very humbling if we've tried our best to play for pretend that nothing bothers us and that we're superhuman. At the same time, it's 100% liberating to join the human family and to feel at one with everyone. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches us that suffering is the door to compassion. And so even though we try really hard to avoid it, it's really one of the ways to joy. That when we can get in touch with our own suffering, we understand everybody else's and develop a lot of compassion for ourselves and for everyone else, which is very lovely. The importance of suffering, I wanted to share with you a poem. It's one of my very favorite poems, and I think it beautifully describes how important being with suffering is. It's a poem called Kindness by Naomi Shihab. And she said, before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go. So you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it's only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you've been looking for, and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. So before we can know kindness, before we can know loving kindness, we really need to be able to get in touch with the suffering. I know that everybody that I know who has experienced suffering reports back that in the moment of their openness to their own suffering, they have felt at one with everybody else who's ever had that same kind of suffering. The really good news about this is that when I first was beginning to practice, I kept reading about suffering. It was called Dukkha in Sanskrit. And Dukkha has been translated to mean unsatisfactoriness. And when I learned that, I thought, wow, unsatisfactory is an opinion. So that was totally freeing in a lot of ways, that I thought, it's only my opinion. that we have been powerfully trained to avoid suffering, to having a value judgment that we tell ourselves that suffering is a terrible, horrible, awful thing. And because of that, we do our best to try to outrun it. We eat, drink, work, exercise, do anything to try to not be with what is. And that's exactly what the Buddha taught us causes most of our suffering, is our unwillingness to accept what is. If it's only our opinion, what that means to me is that I have an opinion that the universe should be working differently than it is, that it should be following my instructions and my desires rather than doing exactly what it's doing, and that what's happening shouldn't be happening, and things should be different than they are. And every time we go there, we're creating more suffering. That's unsatisfactoriness. And so when we train our minds, which is what we're doing when we do our sitting meditation, when we do our walking meditation, when we practice mindfulness every minute of our day when we can, what we learn is that how often our mind is going to that place of choosing to focus on what's not satisfactory, what's not okay. And what we need to be able to do is to develop our mindfulness and concentration so we can see that when it's happening, and that we can choose, that we develop the capacity to choose where to place our minds. And we can choose to place it in a place of acceptance of what is. That doesn't mean that we just sit back and let life happen, but it means we don't argue in the moment with what we free up all of the energy that we would normally waste on resisting what is, to being able to do something in the present moment that can perhaps alleviate some of the suffering. So what becomes obvious the longer that you practice, and what the Buddha taught, what Thai teaches us, is that the mind is at the root of most of our suffering. The Buddha gave a teaching on the second arrow. He said that we can get an arrow in our body, it'll cause some pain. Something happens and we're suffering. And he said if we put a second arrow into the same place, we don't just double the pain, but we can increase it 10 times. And I've known it to be increased about 100 times for myself. The second arrow is what we do with our mind about the first arrow. And something challenging will happen, and the mind will go off into I call it my Stephen King mentality, that the mind can go off into creating a horror story about, oh, if that's the case, then this and this and this will happen, and this will happen, and then the world comes to an end. And if we developed our mindfulness and concentration, we can observe that happening. We can see our mind going down that path, and we can stop it. We can bring the mind back to much more wholesome places. Einstein said, the world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. And this is, like I said, what I feel to be total empowerment, when we can cultivate the capacity, the mindfulness and the concentration to be able to choose, to make that choice. This is when we're able to, minute by minute by minute, watch the mind, to become aware of where is our mind at any given time. And like I said, if you can just build in times in the day, whether it's if you have a clock that chimes, now they have apps on your phone that can be mindfulness bells. You can set them to go off at any time. Every 20 minutes or every half hour even, to set the bell to go off and just pay attention. Where is my mind? And you find that you have powerful habits of mind that have been caused by your conditioning. Whatever our conditioning has been, we've developed habits of reacting in the world. Some of them are wholesome and some of them are not so much. So our practice is about becoming more aware of what they are, and the ones that are not so wholesome, being able to transform and heal them. So this leads us to the second noble truth. And I think that that will be a topic of another talk. We're going to be Going much more in depth into the causes of suffering. There's suffering exists, there are causes of suffering, there's a cessation of suffering, and there's the way out, the Eightfold Path. And so in the next talk, I'll talk a little bit more about going deeply into the causes of the suffering and the way out. In the meantime, I think that anything you can do in your daily life to enhance your mindfulness and your concentration minute by minute by minute, strengthen your practice, can only help you to transform your relationship with suffering. When the Buddha talked about a cessation, he doesn't mean we'll never suffer again. If we practice, that's a misperception that a lot of people have. Oh, if I just practice, I'll never suffer again. What it does is it changes our relationship with suffering. When I realize that I don't have to make a value judgment. I don't have to say, oh, suffering is horrible and not suffering is a great thing. If I just can look at it as all being part of the whole. Suffering is a part of life. The Buddha gave us a teaching on the vicissitudes. There's praise, blame, loss, gain, fame, disrepute, like that. And they're all a part of life. We don't need to resist any part. We go through life trying to resist one whole half of life. We try to resist the pain. We try to resist the, let's see, there's fame and disrepute. We try to resist the disrepute. We try to resist the pain. We try to resist the loss. And all of that is just a part of what is. The sooner we can come to an acceptance of what is, the less suffering we experience. So I just wanted to end this talk with a poem by Wendell Berry. It's called A Spiritual Journey. And the world cannot be discovered by a journey of miles, no matter how long, but only by a spiritual journey, a journey of 1 inch, very arduous and humbling and joyful, by which we arrive at the ground at our feet and learn to be at home. So we don't need to go anywhere. We don't need to run after anything. It's in us. And the path has been given to us by the Buddha, and Thich Nhat Hanh has given us a beautiful roadmap to follow that path. So I want to thank you all for listening to this talk. I hope that I've offered you something that you can put into practice. At the end of every sutra, it says, oh, the bhikshus were so happy. They put it into practice right away. So I hope that I offer you something you can put into practice right away, and you'll suffer less and be happier. I'll end with 3 sounds of the bell.